Tell me, do you know this feeling? You're jamming along with some backing tracks or with your friends, and after a while you're thinking, haha, I'm playing always the same, and I'm bored, and my solos, they sound like typical metal solos, and it's not interesting at all. Well, you are at the right place, because today I'm going to show you 5 easy tricks how to jazz up your metal solo. Here we go. Hey Guitar Champion, what's going on? I'm 𝙎𝙤𝙢𝙚 back from my practice dojo and welcome to today's video. From 2012 to 2017 I have studied jazz guitar in a jazz university here in Frankfurt, Germany. At this time I totally abandoned metal guitar, technical shredding, all this kind of stuff. I was for 4.5 years really into only bebop guitar, hard bop, blues, fusion, you name it. All this kind of things. But this time really showed me how jazz music works, how jazz improvisation works, in that it's much easier than you might think when you understood certain rules and certain concepts. And today I want to show you 5 of my favorite tricks that I nowadays include into my metal solos to make them a little bit more spicy and interesting, and easy tricks to go away from the typical pentatonic and 3-note per string kind of shredding. As always, tabs for today's video you will find in the description box. There you can download it for free. Hit the subscribe button, leave a like and a comment, and now let's begin. Okay, we have to discuss some rules before we going into those 5 tips and tricks. Otherwise you won't sound like this, but more like this. What I've understood during my time in jazz university is that you have to think a little bit in a meta kind of verse above the usual harmonic structures and approaches to music. Because in jazz music it's more about tension and release and about creating a certain sound. The tools for these kind of sounds and for the tension and the release is our harmonic structure in the end, and are some theoretical kind of things that we have to know about. When we don't follow these certain harmonical rules, on the other hand, we easily sound like nonsense and like bullshit by just playing around and playing certain frets without really knowing what we are doing there. A jazz musician, mostly, I would say to 80% or to 90% knows what he's doing there. But in the end, it's still much simpler than we might think in the beginning. The first thing that we have to do, we especially as metal players, we have to get rid of the mindset of using scales. In a jazz improvisation, or in every improvisation nowadays, for me for example, we more embrace intervals and intervallic structures rather than scales. For example, the backing track that you heard in the beginning, it's an E minor kind of backing track with a little bit of a flat 5 in it, a little bit of this typical thrash metal kind of riffing. But I don't care. I don't think this as a Phrygian scale or as a Phrygian scale with a flat 5 in it. And even though that we have a riff which is something like this, order of the notes, they are so quickly that they don't have an impact on the general vibe and the general kind of sound. I see everything as E minor. Not necessarily E minor the scale, but more E minor the triad. And then I can build up my tension by including different kind of intervals. So with that freedom in mind, we can include the major 6, we can include the flat 9, we can include the flat 5, all these kind of intervals that create a certain sound. And now let's move on to trick number 1. The first trick is basically a really simple trick that I've got from experimenting and learning about swing guitar and gypsy jazz guitar, especially the music in the style of Django Reinhardt. Now, and there they have a really common lick that you may have heard or may have seen somewhere else. And it is, you're taking the triad notes, in this case E minor triad notes, so we have like E, G, E, E, G, B, E, like this for example. And then you see this, it's a target note, and you approach that note with a chromatic note underneath your target note. Like this. With a little bit of swing feeling and swing rhythm in it, you easily have this kind of really cool gypsy jazz kind of sound. Of course, you can play around with some more chromatical approaches, like for example playing one scale note above the target note and then one chromatic note underneath the target note, like this. You can experiment with all kind of different variations, but this is a really cool approach, and the most easiest and effective one is the one with the chromatic note underneath the target note. Right, let's move on to tip number 2. Tip number 2 is using a scale which is, as soon as I'm hearing that scale, it instantly remembers me of players like Brett Garsett, Sean Lane or Alan Holdsworth, and that's the melodic minor scale. So again, our general vibe is E minor. And of course we can decide to play E harmonic minor over it, or E alternate or whatever, but E melodic minor has such a really cool, interesting, unique kind of sound to it. It has a certain tension, but it's not too much of a tension like in harmonic minor, for example, where you have the 1.5 tone step. You get away with that 1.5 tone step by increasing the minor 6 to a major 6, and you get this. I really love this kind of vibe and this kind of sound, especially with some legato in it. Because with a little bit of delay and reverb, it sounds so much more fluent, but you instantly have this kind of fusion-esque kind of vibe. So check out the melodic minor scale. I will give you one shape to experiment a little bit with. And using the melodic minor scale over an E minor kind of backing track or thrash metal backing track gives us instantly so much more kind of fusion and Holdsworth-esque kind of vibes and sound. Absolutely love it. Let's continue. So tip number 3 is a concept that I've got from one of my favorite Megadeth guitar players out there, 𝗗𝙗𝙦𝙦. And this is a really cool showcase how you can transform that Brazilian rhythmical kind of approach on linear scalar playing into metal music. Here we go. And I'm talking about stretch pentatonics or stretchy playing in general, like this lick for example. This is something that Kiko really loves to do, and especially in songs like We'll Be Back, The Threat Is Real, Conquer or Die, and all this kind of really cool, great Megadeth solo. You can see how perfectly those kind of style fits to metal and to thrash metal music. And now let's move on to trick number 4. Using bebop lines. And here we don't have like general rules how we can create bebop lines. There are a few rules, but this would be one full video. And if you want to have a video on bebop lines, especially in metal music, write it down in the comments. But I will give you an advice how I learned my bebop lines. In the beginning, I googled like bebop lines. And then when you Google bebop lines, you will get like 100,000 YouTube videos and 100,000 pages with tabs on it with all different bebop lines. And I tried out one and it did not really work. It did not really sound good. I couldn't remember it. I never used it. I forgot it and I quickly went back to my kind of shredding. But what really helped was then in my university to focus on 1 or 2 specific players from that area and from that time. And for me it was especially like 3 players. First, Pat Martino. I've learned the heck out of the concept of Pat Martino, and Pat Martino has a really cool concept how he is using substitutions, a thing that we're going to talk in a minute a little bit, over different kind of chords, give them really cool sound and really cool kind of way for his bebop lines. Jimmy Rainey and his son Doug Rainey, and of course Wes Montgomery. And by focusing on this little group of players, instead of going out in the internet where you have like thousands of ideas, thousands of different opinions, thousands of licks, it was much easier for me to digest the information. I start transcribing music, I start transcribing a certain solo, and not too much. You don't have to do like the full catalog. It is often really okay when you transcribe 1 or 2 solos, and then you take 1 or 2 little snippets out of that solo and create those kind of licks to your own lick. Now, generally, you could say bebop licks are based on chromatical approaches again, similar like the gypsy one that we've learned in the beginning. But you can do, for example, something like this. Was that a little bit too fast for you? Then check the tabs in the description box. There I tapped out this lick. There, to be honest, I don't have too much of a concept on how I use certain chromatic kind of things, but it's more like the chromatical approach is more like filling the gaps in between certain notes, because it's even though on such a hard tempo that it won't be recognizable when I try to chromatically approach certain chord notes. No, it's more there to fill in gaps like from the 4th to the 5th, or from the major 6th to the octave. And this is exactly the way how a lot of jazz musicians thought. This is a way to fill certain gaps and to make a smooth transition from one note to the next note instead of jumping around inside of the scale. You know, like really smoothly as a sax player going from the 5ths to the octave, you don't do. You do something like this. Or famous kind of going from the major 3rd to the 5ths, resolving to the root note. Those kind of favorite licks, they all coming from this kind of mindset to fill in gaps and to have a smooth transition to one note to the next note. And then again, choose yourself 1, 2, 3 guitar players, Pat Metheny, John Scofield, Wes Montgomery, all these kind of really cool guys from the past, and learn their repertoire, learn some of their licks, find out more about their kind of style, and try to include that into your playing. It's one of the best things that I've ever did. Of course, you can also do other instruments like the OG of bebop licks, Charlie Parker or John Coltrane, or even the old school Miles Davis. Before he starts to get boring with Kind of Blue, I know, hot take, but the first Miles Davis quartet, I absolutely love it. There's so many so cool bebop lines on there and bebop songs. Definitely worth to check out. And especially his time with Charlie Parker, of course. And now let's get back into the future and let's check out tip number 5. Tip number 5 are substitutions, and I talked about substitutions in some of my videos there, and I will give you as well one of the videos from the ZEN of Sweeping, my big online masterclass about sweeping, where I talked a little bit more into detail of substitutions. You can find this with the tabs together in the link in the description box. And if you want to learn more, of course, about the ZEN of Sweeping and get 50% off for the ZEN of Speedpicking, then check out the link in the description box. And then check out the link in the description box, because buying one of my courses gives you the other one 50% off. But the main concept of substitutions is that you're taking a chord sound like E minor and you are adding on top of that chord sound a different chord. And by embracing the note that we have on the chord, which is on top of our main chord, we create a certain sound. We're adding that sound to the main chord. For example, when I play G major 7 over E minor 7, what kinds of interval do I have related to E? G is the minor 3rd, E is the 5th, D is the 7th, F sharp is the 9th. So I create E minor 7 9th sound over these kind of rhythms. Or you can do D major. Let's check out what we have when we're playing D major over E minor. We have D, which is the 7th, F sharp, which is again the 9th, and A, which is the 4th. So when we're playing D major over E minor, we create an E minor kind of sus2, sus4 with the 7th sound. Really cool. But you can also go a little bit atonal with different kind of chords that are not necessarily in the E minor scale. For example, what is happening when we're playing B flat major over E minor? B flat is the flat 5, D is the 7, and F is the flat 9. So we create an E minor 7 flat 5 flat 9 chord when we're playing this type of arpeggio over E minor. A lot of tension in it. Be careful with this kind of concept, but I highly recommend to just experiment with different chords or different kind of substitutions over one particular chord. Alright, so much about this video with 5 tips how you can jazz up your solos. Be creative, be brave, and I want to encourage everybody to experiment with these kind of methods and with these kind of licks. I hope I'm going to see you in my next video. Thank you for your support. Cheers and power your progress.